Hey, what's up guys? It's Shamrocked here with a new guide for you. This is for Dawnbreaker. It's on a plus 19. Been getting a lot of questions for this video, so I hope the strategies I go through will help some of the people out. I think the biggest pain point from what I'm hearing that people are having is the first boss. So we will go over that in depth as well as the entire dungeon. I might also just parse out the first boss video just to make it easier for people who are just like looking for that. I'll post it separately, but yeah, before we get into it, let's just take a look at the talents that we run for this. Left side is pretty standard. The only things I would say are of note are the improved Purify Spirit, which is your curse dispel. You're definitely going to want this for the, unfortunately not the first area, which I'll explain why, but you do want it for later in the dungeon when you're getting curses on some of the other packs. Thunderous Pause. So the curse itself is actually a snare. It counts as a snare because it does have a slow attached to it. So with Thunderous Pause, you can just like get rid of that if you remember to. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I would say Refreshing Waters is really important in this dungeon as well, in case you get any of the mini boss dots. Your healing surges are just going to be that much more powerful on yourself. But other than that, I actually think maybe you would maybe get rid of Windrush Totem and put it into Primordial Bond just for the extra defensive. I don't know. It's up to you. But this is pretty much what I would run for the left side of the talents. For the right side, once again, pretty standard build if you've watched any of my other videos. This is for sure a dungeon where I advise taking Ancestral Awakening. You're going to need every single bit of healing that you can get, and you're also going to be using a lot of healing surges and Riptides in this dungeon. So you do get a lot of value out of Ancestral Awakening. And you don't really need Earthen Harmony or Therazane's Resilience specifically for this dungeon at all. I don't think the 3% DR is going to help you at all. It may help your tank a little bit, but I don't think it's going to be the difference between them living or dying. So yeah, absolutely recommend taking Ancestral Awakening. Let me just check here if I still have my Dawnbreaker. I do. So let's take a look at this. We'll take a look at the overall healing. So Ancestral Awakening was almost 6% of my overall healing. Unfortunately, I can't look at anything specific because my stuff has overwritten it, so I can't tell you what it is on each boss, but 6% is nothing to scoff at. It's probably, in my opinion, much higher value for this dungeon specifically than what you'd get out of Earthen Harmony. Yeah, that's it for talents. I will upload the import string into the details of this video, so you can just copy that directly if you want this build, and then you can just change what you want. So with talents out of the way, let's take a look at the Dawnbreaker. All right, here we go. So one thing I also forgot to mention with the talents is Seasoned Winds. This is very important. You're going to be getting a lot of damage reduction through kicking casts in this dungeon. So just make sure you have that talented and make sure you're kicking basically on cooldown when you can. So for this first pull, you're going to need a kick rotation on the two casters here, especially on a higher key. If one of those bolts goes off, you are likely dead. Also, it's very important that you yourself kick on cooldown if possible, as you will get a 30% damage reduction on shadow damage and basically will make yourself unkillable regardless of what ability you get targeted with here. Immediately going into the pull, I'm going to pop my Lumathar trinket, and that's just going to keep everybody nice and healthy while I ramp up. I'm going to drop a Cloudburst Totem. I'm going to get my Ancestral Swiftness as well as my Unleashed Life on cooldown. And then I'm just going to heal away. For people targeted by the beam, you want to use Healing Surges. You also want to use Flow Chain Heals to get your stacks on Coalescing Waters, which is just going to make your Riptides really powerful. So really you're just alternating between Riptides, Healing Surges, and Chain Heals here to keep the group alive while you're kicking on cooldown. For the Dispels, you would need to save your Dispel, non-negotiable, for the Stygian Seed. That is the big dot that the main enemy here, the big enemy, puts out, which unfortunately means you can't really dispel the curses. So it's helpful in my group. We have a Paladin. He can just use Freedom on the curse people, but that's where you want to like put your Thunderous Pause ability to use, and anybody else who can get rid of a curse. If you have like a Druid or a Mage that can decurse, or if you have other classes that can get rid of movement impairments, they should be used for those curses because you do need to save your Dispel for the Stygian Seed. All right, going into the second pull, we are going to Lust. I'm going to use my Ascendance pretty much right away with the first beams just to make sure everybody's healthy. Don't have to worry about anyone dying. I'm also watching my tank very carefully here because the tank will be taking a lot of damage. And what I'm also doing is I'm saving my Spirit Link for the tank towards the end of the pull when he's a little bit weaker. When the tank has the bleed and the beam on them at the same time, they take a ton of damage because they're also obviously taking like the melees. So that's a good point to watch them, and it's a good point to spam a Spirit Link if they look like they need assistance, which you actually see I just did there. I also use Healing Tide here at some point, so just to say that this is a pull where you can literally send all of your cooldowns. You don't need them again until the boss. That includes Lumathar as well, which I also used. Other than that, you'll notice these first two pulls, I'm not really DPSing a whole lot. Like I'm getting Chain Lightnings in when I can, but I'm not prioritizing DPS. I am saving all of my juice for healing. It's very easy to lose people on higher keys in these two pulls, just because if they get comboed with a curse and a beam, or if you're just like not ramped up and ready for the damage that's going out, it's very easy to have somebody die. So make sure you're saving your Ancestral Swiftness for saving the group and not using it for DPS. All right, the next two bolt pulls, you're basically just gonna have a kick rotation on the Shadow Mage as well as the big spider guy, if you can. Thankfully, we have a warrior tank, so you can just spell reflect a lot of the bolts. But more important that you get the Shadow Mage. Usually the tank can handle the bolts, and then once the Shadow Mage dies, you can then have your group kicking the web bolts. Otherwise, you're going to get the bursting cocoon on people. Just make sure you're keeping them topped up throughout the entire dot. Theoretically, if they have one, they should be using a defensive for the explosion. But you can get unlucky, and the bursting cocoon can target the same person like multiple times in a row. It can literally target the same person every single time, so you do need to watch for that. In the case where somebody is targeted 3-4 times in a row and they don't have a defensive, that's a good option to pop Lumi if you have it available, just to save them on that last pop. It's also a good option to use Spirit Link, once again, if you have it available, just to save them. As you will not need them at the beginning of the boss, you can just use them when they come up. Also important, once again, if you are kicking the web bolts, that you kick them as much as possible to get the nature DR. That means that when you get targeted by the bursting cocoon, you will already have a 15 or 30% DR on yourself, and it's just like much less painful to deal with. Otherwise, make sure if you're getting targeted, you are using your Astral Shift ability or your Stone Bulwark Totem, once again, for that last explosion. You don't want to use it for the regular ticks, you just want to spam Healing Surge on yourself. And for healing anybody else with the dot, once again, spamming Healing Surge is your best bet. If you're running a high key and you're nervous about the damage on anyone, especially if you're running with like a squishy member like a Boomkin or something like that, you can also put Earth Shield on that target, and then your healing will be 20% more effective. So just always keep that in mind. Okay, and that's pretty much it for these pulls. I mean, these pulls are like nothing. It's pretty much a break, as long as your tank is good and you have kicks under control. And hopefully, once again, the same person's not getting targeted over and over by the bursting cocoon. These pulls are a breeze. It's also nice because it is time for your mana to regen back up to full for the next boss. And it's also time to like let all of your cooldowns come off of cooldown, because you probably use them on the last pull. Okay, you'll see I just marked Shad with a triangle. That's just so we can all bait the circles properly for the next boss, which you'll see. And then lastly, for these pulls, if the spider casts the bursting cocoon as he's dying, the dot itself will be real, however the explosion will be fake, so just worry about that. Okay, now we have Shadowcrown. This is probably one of the scariest dungeons in the game. In Season 1, they made it so that the Healing Absorb did not scale with the key level, so it was extremely easy. In this season, it is the opposite. It's probably one of the hardest bosses because the Absorb is basically your entire health bar on these higher keys. So first Absorb, I'm going to dispel the dot immediately, and then about a second or two after that, I'm going to put a Cloudburst Totem down. I'm also going to use my Ancestral Swiftness here, as well as my Unleash Life, and just go ham on the healing, targeting people with Riptides with the Chain Heals, and then with my Coalescing Waters buffed Riptides, I'm just like, using those and Healing Surges to buff the group. Then, when the next Dispel comes out, I dispel that right away, and I'm also going to use Lumathar for this first beam. And as I'm healing, my Cloudburst Totem, which is filled pretty nicely from the first set of dispels, is going to explode during that second overlap. And that's how you're gonna deal with the first beam and Burning Shadows overlap. Second one that comes out, I'm gonna dispel right away. I also put down a Cloudburst Totem. And then for this one, if I cannot get the group healed up in time, I'm asking them to use a personal. However, I also use Ascendance for this set, so that basically helps me top the group. For this third set, I'm going to use a Healing Tide. Once again, I'm going to dispel it right away and put a Cloudburst Totem down right before it comes out. This is going to be Healing Tide, and I'm going to Healing Surge, Chain Heal, and Riptide as much as I can. And then right before the beam comes out, I pop my Cloudburst Totem, and that basically tops the group. All right, we're at 58% on the boss, which means we're probably going to phase him either right before or right after a Dispel goes out. Thankfully, we actually phase her right before it comes out, which is nice. However, if it were to come out, I was going to ask for an AMZ here, and I was going to heal people up, and if they need to health pot, they can health pot. Basically, you need to explain to your group beforehand, especially if you're not in comms, that if the Dispel comes out while you're phasing, people need to stay on the boat until you heal that Dispel, the heal absorb off of them, because they will just die if they fly away, guaranteed. So you have a ton of time when the intermission starts. You have like 10-15 seconds for that cast, which should be plenty of time for you to heal at least most of the group up. You know, maybe somebody dies, whatever, it's not a big deal, but heal as much as you can. All right, this first dot is extremely scary because you have Obsidian Beam coming out immediately after. That your Lumi should be up though, so use your Lumathar trinket for this set. You'll also see I used a health pot there as well because my health got very low. I also could have used Stone Bulwark Totem. I probably just didn't think about it. All right, next set is going to be a Spirit Link because it's the last throughput cooldown I have. Yep, here we go. If you're running Spouting Spirits, that's going to be a nice big heal in the group. And then once people, at least one or two of them, have their healing absorbs healed off, the Spirit Link will do the rest for the other people, which is very, very handy. I'm also getting a kick in whenever I can just for the DR. Unfortunately, it's hard to like keep a DR here because she doesn't actually cast the kick enough, but just use it as much as you can. For this next set, I use Ascendance. Once again, if you're following my cooldown timings, you should have the same thing pretty much up for every one that I have up. And make sure you're also using your Totemic Recall. I used it at the beginning of the fight just to make sure you have a Cloudburst for each and every single one of these absorbs. All right, this next one, I have a Healing Tide coming up. I don't actually know if I'll need it. Yeah, I do. So I do pop Healing Tide there. Also using Chain Heal on my Riptide targets for Flow of the Tides. And there, that's it for that. Easy. So this fight is very hard in theory, but if you just space out your cooldowns nicely, tell your group to use defensives when you need them to, and really just stay calm and work towards having something for the beam sets, whether it's a personal, an AMZ, a darkness, a Lumi, whatever, and also just using your Cloudburst totems very intelligently if you can to pop people up right before the beam comes out, just to get people high enough so that the beam doesn't one-shot them. Thankfully, there's no damage after the beam, so if you need a couple of seconds to like top people up after the beam goes out, it's no big deal. Your main goal is to not let anyone die during that beam. And that's it. One thing I didn't mention, just because I'm going through this a little bit too fast, is I'm also watching my Swelling Tides stacks. So that is my tracker on the left beside my Ancestral Swiftness and my Unleashed Life tracker. Right now it currently reads 75. That is my High Tide stack builder. So once that gets to 100, I get High Tide. So I'm also paying attention to that on that first boss. Basically trying to build for High Tide stacks before a Dispel comes out. And that way, when I put my Cloudburst totem down and I Dispel, my first couple of chain heals that I use are buffed by High Tide, which makes a huge difference in filling that Cloudburst totem and getting those healing absorbs off people. This next pull can be quite scary, especially because you do not necessarily have throughput cooldowns to get through it because you've probably used all of them for the boss. The tank is also taking a stacking debuff that makes them take less healing. There's dots that are going out on people, curses, casts that are going off. This pull is very hectic. So basically, I had Lumathar up for that, so I popped that right away. I had my Ascendance come up halfway through, so I popped that right away. But otherwise, you're kind of just spot healing people, making sure you're using Healing Surge on people who are low. And if nobody is extremely low, you're using your Flow of the Tides buffed chain heals to heal the group with the Cloudburst totem down, preferably to fill up that Cloudburst, and using the Coalescing Waters buffed Riptides in between. And that's basically your rotation. You'll also see I died there. That's really just because we let a bolt go off, so really nothing you can personally do about that except maybe kick better. Also, you'll notice for that pull is half of the circles that spawn are invisible. Really just unfortunate. There's nothing you can do about it. Just try to avoid them. Any circle that gets put on the ramp that's there will like guaranteed be invisible, so try to avoid standing there as much as you can. And then also avoid jumping because that will make circles invisible. We've had instances where it looks like Ascendance floating causes them to be invisible. That's not guaranteed, but we have seen that look like it happened a few times. So yeah, the circles just kind of suck. There's nothing really you can do about it. All right, for this pull, we pull the mini boss out to the group out here, and basically they don't target this Dark Caster. I'm going to kick the Dark Caster on cooldown as much as I can to keep that 30% shadow damage DR, which basically means if I ever get targeted with the Abyssal Blast debuff, I am super tanky. While this caster is alive, I do not have to worry about it or blow defensives on it. In this run, unfortunately, I don't think I get targeted by it once while my DR is up, which is, you know, just kind of unfortunate, but it is what it is. Healing people with the debuff, pretty easy actually, especially as Farseer. It's much easier than trying to heal them as Totemic. You just basically spam Healing Surge on them with Riptides as well to get your Tidal Wave stack so that your Healing Surge is crit. You can also put an Earth Shield on the person if you need to. And every so often you'll have your Unleash Life as well as your Ancestral Swiftness, which will greatly buff your single target heal. So very, very simple. The only problem with this healing is obviously it's very mana intensive, but thankfully Farseer has so much mana that even with the heal spamming, you probably won't dip below 50%. You can just take a quick drink after the pull for a few seconds to get back up to where you need to be. As you can see, our Rep Pally is getting targeted by each and every single one, which kind of sucks because he's probably like the least tankiest for this kind of thing. Once again, it's really ideal if you get targeted by most of them while the caster is up, just because you have so much DR. As you can see, I just got targeted by it at the end when the caster is dead, so I don't have any DR running, but thankfully it's like the end of the pull, so it doesn't matter that much. All right, I'm just drinking here for a second, and then we are going to our Lust pull next. This pull seems scary on the surface, but as a Resto Shaman, you have a lot of tools for it. So we're going to pull this, we're going to Lust. This is another pull, pretty much just like all the pulls, where you want to keep your Dispel on, or sorry, your kick on cooldown for that extra shadow damage DR. Make sure if you can too, if you're in Discord, you're communicating with your group and that your group is communicating with you when they are strong or weak with the Abyssal Blast. Basically, you're going to alternate between having one Abyssal Blast dot on a person that is not overlapped with anything, to an Abyssal Blast dot on a person that overlaps with the orb that's going out. So it's always going to be one dot with no overlap, and then the second dot will have an overlap. So people should obviously save their defensives for these sets with an overlap. Thankfully, we have Lumathar this season, so that is a great option to use if you're worried about somebody. We also have Spirit Link, which is probably one of the best abilities for this pull as well. So you can use that if anybody is like sort of scared about the dot that they have, or, you know, the overlap. This is one thing I don't like about this dungeon, is because the Abyssal Blasts are completely random. There's no bad luck protection. The same person can get targeted over and over and over, and obviously they just run out of defensives to use, which is like hard to deal with. So that's really where you can kind of just get like cucked in this dungeon. However, the opposite can also happen, and like the tankiest people or the people with immunities can get targeted the most, which makes it obviously a lot easier to deal with. But yeah, don't be afraid to use all of your throughput cooldowns for this pull as well. Ideally, you want to save at least one, like I saved Healing Tide there, for the next pull if you're going to Grandma's house with the final mini-boss, which I believe we're about to do. Just because, once again, this is a pull where if anybody gets targeted with the Abyssal Blast dot during the AoE overlap, it can be very painful if they don't have something to use. This mini-boss is just like the last one, except a little bit less scary in my opinion. You're going to get one dot with no overlap, and then your next dot is going to have an overlap. So just make sure you're aware of that, and you're communicating with your group, whether you have something you can use or they have something they can use. So for that first overlap, I used Lumathar. For the next overlap, I'm probably going to use Healing Tide. We also have AMZ and Darkness. However, I'm trying to save both AMZ and Darkness for the boss. We only have one pull after this before the boss, so I'd rather none of those be on cooldown. And also, I would consider Ancestral Swiftness to be a mini throughput cooldown for any of those AoE phases. So if you can save Ancestral Swiftness for that AoE damage, it's probably best that you do so. And what you'll see I'm doing for the AoE on this mini boss, as well as on the boss itself, is I'm putting Riptide out as much as I can on as many people as I can for ammunition on those Flow of the Tides buffed chain heals. So as you can see for this one, I used Ancestral Swiftness into an immediate Flow of the Tides buff chain heal, into Coalescing Waters buff Riptides, into Healing Surges. Like, it's such a nice feedback loop for the Farseer Resto Shaman this season. It really works well and feels good. And then all of that down, or all of that happening while you have a Cloudburst Totem down is obviously ideal, and you can pop the Cloudburst Totem at the very end of the AoE just to give everybody a little boost of health. All right, and that's it for this pull. not too bad. Next pull is actually a little bit scary. So this is a pull that's different from Season 1 as they've added the, what are they called? The Ritualists, which are the guys in the first area that do the beam and the Stygian seed dot. So we're about to go to the big bridge pull with that, which is right here. This pull also has a caster, so obviously you want to keep your kick on cooldown for that extra Season Winds DR in case you get targeted by the Tormenting Ray. Makes this much easier to deal with. Otherwise, just like the second pull of the dungeon, I used a Lumathar trinket right away, just once again to keep people healthy for that first set of beams while I ramp up. Next set of beams should always be much easier because I have Riptides out, I have Swelling Tide stacks built, I have, you know, maybe a Cloudburst down, I have my, you know, I always find the first set of these beams for these pulls are always hardest, so that's where I try to use Lumathar on them. This is a pull as well where your tank is eventually going to need to get rid of their stacks. So for us, we call a cap totem into a knockup, obviously with an Earthbind totem down as well if you can. And that should give your tank plenty of time to run out and reset stacks if they need to. Be careful of stun DR obviously though. So we have our Havoc Demon Hunter, be careful. They have stuns as a part of the rotation, so he basically just doesn't use those stuns on this pull, so that when the tank actually needs a full stun, it's a cap totem stun, and he can just run away during that, and makes it much easier for him to reset his stacks. Alright, next we have Anub'Ikkaj. This boss I think is a really fun healer boss. It's actually been one of the most fun healer bosses since the beta, which is great. They actually nerfed it quite a bit from the beta, just like the original PTR for the expansion because it was too hard. The damage was just like too much. I think it used to tick every half second instead of every second for the AoE. But anyways, so you're going to put a Cloudburst totem down immediately as soon as that first Shadow Orb goes out. You're going to put Riptides on your entire group. You're going to set up an Ancestral Swiftness for this first set of AoE, and you're going to pop Ascendance right before it begins. And you are going to use the Ascendance combo with your Flow of the Tides buffed Chain Heals while your Cloudburst totem is down to heal your group. And you can use your Cloudburst totem as like a manual explosion at the end for the last tick or last 2 ticks of the AoE to keep people's HP high enough so that they do not die. And that's basically how your AoE set is going to work every single time, just with a different set of throughput cooldowns. So once again, Shadow Orb goes out, Cloudburst goes down. This set we are using AMZ as well as Lumathar, and I am just using my Ancestral Swiftness, which will be up for every single AoE if you save it for it. And I'm using my Flow of the Tides buff Chain Heals with my Coalescing Waters buff Riptides, supplemented with my Healing Surges when necessary, and that's pretty much it. That heals it. I feel like on a hierarchy, like a 20, you'd probably need to start comboing throughput cooldowns and DR cooldowns, but thankfully on a 19, it's not the end of the world to just use one. Alright, this next orb is comboed with Shadowy Decay. This is what we call the overlap. It's always the 4th Shadow Orb and the 3rd AoE damage. We are going to use Spirit Link and Darkness here. Normally Spirit Link will be enough if you use Spirit Link and personal DRs across the group, but because we have Darkness, we just combo those two. You could also combo like Spirit Link and AMZ as well, or, you know, depending on maybe AMZ and Mass Barrier, or sorry, Spirit Link and Mass Barrier. It's basically just something you want to combo for that overlap because it is quite nasty. And if you're following my cooldown usage, our next set, we will have Ascendance back up. So we're just going to use that. And once again, I'm just setting up Riptides on the entire group, putting down a Cloudburst totem down when that Dark Orb explodes, healing the group up for the Shadowy Decay, using my Ancestral Swiftness as the Shadowy Decay begins, combo it with whatever throughput cooldown I have, which in this case is Ascendance, and then I just go to town. There is also, if you haven't noticed, an ability tracker on the top left, so you can see exactly what I'm casting to heal each and every single one of these. Boss is at 30%, so I'm assuming we get at least one more AoE, possibly 2. My next one, I have Healing Tide. Since Healing Tide is not the strongest cooldown in the world, I think I combo it here with Lumathar. Not necessarily necessary, but just to be rather safe than sorry. Here we go, Healing Tide is down. Also use Lumathar just because. And that keeps the group nice and healthy. So we actually kill the boss before the next AoE. However, if we have one more set, you can see I'm pretty much dry for throughput cooldowns. So this is an instance where I would call the entire group to use a personal and to let me know if they do not have a defensive so that I can focus on healing them. It's also would be a health pot set as well that you could call for. So once again, one of the things I've learned about running really high keys and having a nice coordinated group, whether your group's coordinated or not, as long as you're in communications with them, you should be fine. But don't be afraid to call for damage sets, personals, health pots. Use your group's defenses and health pots as your own cooldowns. You know what I mean? Like dictate them. Like try to control what they're using and when they're using it. If you know you're going to be really strong for a certain set, let your group know so that they don't waste any cooldowns or waste any health pots or anything like that. In that way, they will have that stuff up for like when you do want to call it. Anyways, going into this mini boss is probably one of the scariest parts of the dungeon. I prefer to have Lumathar up going into this pull. However, it doesn't always work out that way. So if you do not have Lumathar up, just make sure you have some sort of personal to get through this first set of beams, because as I've discussed before, the first set is usually always the scariest because you have no ramp. You have no Riptides out, you have no Filled Cloudburst. The only thing you do have is possibly an Ancestral Swiftness and a Unleashed Life, which will help carry you a bit through like the first couple of ticks, but always scary these first sets, so just be extra careful. All right, otherwise it's pretty, I was gonna say it's pretty easy to see like what's happening here because he does rotate the Tormenting Eruption. However, it's not always logical. Usually you can assume if you haven't had the beam, you're about to get it. It doesn't always work that way. And usually you can assume if you just had the beam, you won't get it again. However, once again, does not always work that way. So you always do need to be on your toes. Don't be afraid to use a throughput cooldown here on this boss if you need to. However, do not use all of your throughput cooldowns because you will need them for the boss that's coming up. Also super important on this pull that you want to get as many kicks in as you can for that shadow damage DR from Season Winds. If you can keep 30% up, that basically means you never have to worry about yourself with that beam. You can just hard focus on healing other people, and you can save your defenses for the actual boss. Okay, first Erosive Spray, I'm going to use Ascendance. I believe I don't combo it with anything else here, but I do have Ancestral Swiftness up for it as well. I'm letting my group know what I'm using. I'm putting a Cloudburst Totem down immediately beforehand, and I am just going to town. What I do here is really stupid. I actually pick up this bomb. You should not do that. Do not pick up a bomb until these dots go away. You have plenty of time to pick up the bombs. As long as you have someone helping with them, you can just pick up one once the damage is done. Do not be an idiot like I am and pick up the bomb during the AoE damage, especially if you don't have a defensive or didn't use a defensive, because it will just kill you. For this next set, we're comboing AMZ and Spirit Link Totem. And once again, same thing. I just put a Cloudburst Totem down. I use Ancestral Swiftness, and I'm just going to town with my heals. And don't be afraid to double up cooldowns on this first set, whether it's Lumathar and Ascendance, Spirit Link and AMZ, Healing Tide and Spirit Link, whatever you got to do. I suggest using 2 just because you can. There's lots of time between this phase and the next phase, so you will have lots of time for your healing cooldowns to come back off of cooldown. You just want to keep one throughput cooldown available. For us, we are actually taking a special detour as well. We do this pack during the boss. Basically, the way this works is eventually the boss is going to start doing a ramping AoE. It takes a while for him to start though. As you can see the timer up there, we have 15 seconds. So we are basically just going to kill this pull while we're not taking any damage, and then we're going to fly over to the boss. The damage is enough that you will die while flying back to the boss if you don't use something. So that's why I'm saving Lumathar for this. I'm going to use Lumathar before we take off. I'm also going to pop my Stone Bulwark Totem, and I think I also use Astral Shift. We'll see. Probably don't need all 3. This is actually just one of our first times actually practicing this, and it was on a 19, so I wanted to be extra careful. But yeah, we are going to kill this group of ads, pop Lumathar, mount up, and head to the boss. The boss will continue to do pulsing damage until you kick him. He will also kill somebody right away if he gets kicked and doesn't get taunted right away, so just like be aware of that. Alright, so we popped Lumathar, I popped Stone Bulwark Totem, and I also popped Astral Shift. I do not need any of these for the first half of the fight. So definitely worth using all of that here. And then this boss is much like Anub'Ikkaj in the sense that every single acid phase you just want to rotate through with a throughput cooldown. The other scary part of this boss, though, are the spinneret strands. It's going to target 2 people. They need to run out, and they just take a whack of damage right after the strands go off. What I try to do is I try to basically prep up a healing surge, whether it's with Unleash Life or if it's buffed by your Master of the Elements, which you get by using Lava Bursts. You want to have a nice big healing surge, and you want to try to time it so that healing surge hits somebody immediately as soon as they take damage, which will hopefully see I do it right a few times. All right, for this first corrosive acid dot AoE thing, I'm using Ascendance, which should be enough by itself to carry it. Once again, just like all of the other AoE phases that I've talked about, you put a Cloudburst Totem down first, save your Ancestral Swiftness for it, and then just go to town. This boss, just like most of the other ones, will work out in the sense that you will have Ancestral Swiftness up for each and every AoE phase if you save it for that. For this next one, I believe we use Healing Tide. Healing Tide, yes, there we go, as well as Ancestral Swiftness. More than enough to keep the group alive. So a nice thing about Farseer is if you set yourself up right and save your Ancestral Swiftness for when you need it, you will have very good healing when you need it. Very nice high burst healing. And then the cherry on top is having a nice Cloud Burst to explode at the end. All right, so I've Lava Bursted here. I have my Master of the Elements buffed healing surges, and then I'm healing surging one of my victims of the web right away as soon as I can, trying to time it for immediately as they get the damage. All right, for this set, we are using Lumathar and AMZ. As you can tell, I like pairing those two. Lumi itself, unfortunately, is not usually enough to get through like an AoE damage phase on some of these higher keys, but when you pair it with something like AMZ or something like Healing Tide, it just works very, very nicely. Okay, next spray, I'm likely going to use Spirit Link Totem. I'm going to wait for 1 or 2 ticks because I do have Spouting Spirits and I want that heal to be nice and juicy. Here we go. Beautiful. And other than that, same thing. I have a Cloudburst down before, get my Riptides out on the group, and then use them as ammunition for Flow of the Tides chain heals. You'll also see, once again, I'm not ignoring Totemic Recall. I want a Cloudburst for each and every single one of these AoE phases, so I am using Totemic Recall towards the beginning of the fight just to keep my Cloudburst stacks rolling, and then I will have it again at the end of the fight too if I need it. It's a really long boss fight. It's just like Season 1. I feel like they could have probably shortened this last half, but it is what it is. This next set I had Ascendance up again, so that's just what I used. So you can see you have like your strong cooldowns, which would be Ascendance and Spirit Link, and then you have your weak cooldowns, which would be Healing Tide and Lumathar. So Healing Tide and Lumathar you want to combo with something else, whether it's Darkness, AMZ, or even just comboing those two together. Never a bad idea. All right, this next one, we use Darkness. I'm also just keeping my finger on the trigger during Darkness. Sometimes you get a good Darkness, sometimes you get a bad one. This was a pretty good one. But if you get a bad one, you should have something like Lumathar in your back pocket, or like I said, an Ancestral Swiftness in your back pocket or something, just in case the Darkness doesn't go as well as you planned. As you can see, I'm trying to time these healing surges as best I can. It's keeping the people who get the dots, the web dots, alive. It's also, once again, good to be in communication. If you're in comms with your group, people can tell you when they're weak with those webs and tell you when they're strong. It just makes you have a better idea of who needs healing faster for those sort of abilities. But yeah, that's it. That's Dawnbreaker. So once again, not as scary as I think people make it out to be. Obviously, I'm running with a coordinated group. It's going to be different if you're in a pug or maybe you have less control over what the group's doing. But other than the points where I've called out using AMZ and Darkness, you have all of the tools that I have, assuming you have your Lumathar trinket. So you can just use exactly what I used for each and every single boss. Obviously, your timings might be different because your kill times might be different, but in general, you can follow sort of the roadmap that I've laid out for the first boss, second boss, and the last boss, and you will be a-okay. Obviously, a little bit of practice helps. Things like being able to time your Cloudbursts better, build your Swelling Tide stacks for High Tide, knowing how to get all your Riptides out so you have good flow ammo, all that stuff. That all comes with practice and expertise. So do not be discouraged if you know, things go rough the first couple of keys you're doing, just keep practicing, keep focusing on those little things, you know, things like holding ancestral swiftness, and you will become a better shaman for it. But anyways, that's it. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next guide.